What's going on, everybody? We are live and we are back. We've got all three of the Goldens in the building today. Well, not necessarily in the building, but in the frame, whether you're watching on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You're seeing what you're getting. We're here all rocking some Jets gear. Week 18 behind us now, meaning you know exactly what we're here for. We're here to recap the Jets season. I think the last time all three of us got on here to talk specifically Jets was probably preseason or maybe I think it was post week one after that San Francisco 49ers Monday night game. Um, and the writing was on the wall. And here we are, 2024 season behind us, 5-12, not what we wanted. Aaron Rodgers stays healthy for a full season. But it just does not go the way that the expectations had panned out, not goes the way that we wanted it to pan out. And just maybe the most jet-like season in terms of how things can be jetted in my 25 years of life. So there's what are we on? 14 years, 15 years consecutive, no playoffs. We're in the news. Is Rex Ryan going to coach a team? We'll get into all that, but just another embarrassment, another year of agony, another year of what ifs, another year of just wondering what went wrong, when did it go wrong, how do you fix it, and where do we go from here? And unfortunately, a couple years back, when you get Aaron Rodgers, when you go all in, and it seems like you're signing these guys, Smith trading for Adams, it it kind of puts you in a predicament to where you're kind of putting the future to the side. And here we are, January 7th, 2025 now. Where do we go? What do we do? We just went all in, and the team won 5 games this year. So I'll open it up to you guys. Just initial thoughts on the season, it being over, and just kind of relishing in the disappointment of the expectations, which were
Want me to go first?
either or.
Good. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, nobody died, so that's a positive. Other than that, I can't think of anything too positive. As I've mentioned before, this was probably for me, and I go back into the 60s, the most disappointing Jets season ever. Were there worse teams than this in the history of the Jets? Absolutely. The Rich Kotite, 2 years back in the early 90s, had a worse team. Adam Gase was a terrible coach, especially his second year. The Jets were terrible all through the 70s, from 70 to 79. But no team had the expectations that this team had. No team had the talent, the star power that this team had. And if you had told me that, I didn't think you could end up 5-12 with the talent on this team, even if you tried to throw games. I didn't think it was possible. But somehow a team that's got a Hall of Fame quarterback who still has something left, who still threw for almost 4,000 yards. I believe he had 28 touchdowns. He only threw 11 interceptions, probably 5 of which weren't his fault. If you told me that Garrett Wilson would catch over 100 passes this year, Devontae Adams would be signed, he'd catch over 80 and get over 1,000 yards receiving. If you told me that team wasn't at least a wild card team, I would have told you you're crazy. But somehow the Jets found a way, in spite of all those positives, and you throw in Breece Hall, who at times looked pretty good as well. 2 new running backs who complemented the running room really well. Somehow the Jets just found a way to be terrible anyways. So I would sum this up as the most disappointing season ever, the most dumbfounding season ever. And I still can't figure out, in spite of how incompetent our coaches were, how we couldn't have overcome some of that and still been a 9-18. So just it goes without words, just unbelievably frustrating and disappointing from a lifelong Jet fan.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? Complete failure from start to finish, from top to bottom. I mean, I will say that for me personally, this actually, believe it or not, while it was the most disappointing season, it probably wasn't the most frustrating season, because I felt like really right from the get-go, you could see the writing on the wall. We've been Jets fans for far too long. to feel optimistic going into the month of even October about the direction of this team. It was obvious, I would say, by really after the San Francisco game, got our hopes up, the next two games against the Titans and Patriots. But really, I would say by the end of what was it, the Bills game in particular, the Monday Night Football Bills game, to me at that point, season was done. And really, the last few weeks has almost been tuning in strictly to see, how's Rodgers going to finish? Are there going to be any, crazy storylines? Are some of the young players going to flash and maybe give us hope for seasons to come? Same story as every other year. So yeah, complete failure. I don't know that there's much else to add. I think the most frustrating part is just the constant negative storylines, the constant negative attention. You see all these other teams who also suck, and yet you very rarely hear about them. And here we are talking about the Jets in national news. It seems like almost every day. So part of that obviously is playing in New York and due to the ownership that we have. But man, just frustrating, disappointed, but relieved that it's over and excited to once again win the offseason championship, hopefully, and turn back to the craziness of being a Jets fan and believing that next year will be better. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, excruciating would be the word that I would describe the first, I'd say 11 or 12 weeks, and then just meaningless would be that forward the last, I'd say 6 or 7. This season was the epitome of a shit show, the epitome of how just malcontent, people not being fit for their jobs, people that have either quit on their jobs or just have failed tremendously on their jobs. When you talk about, Saleh and Ulbrich and Douglas, the going back in time, I still remember us three doing this podcast when Robert Saleh got hired the morning after the news broke, and the excitement and the theme of that show, the theme of that that move was changing the culture between Joe Douglas and establishing not only a culture, but establishing a place where free agents wanted to be, players wanted to be, coaches wanted to be. We were crazy enough to 3 or 4 years ago, we were concerned that Mike LaFleur was going to be such a good offensive coordinator that he'd be poached after 1 year. Just thinking out loud in terms of what went wrong, where did it go wrong? There's no way to pinpoint it because this is just a continuation of disastrous franchise malcontent moves that have been made from ownership, that have been made from management, that have been made from coaching. And this was just the cherry on top in terms of the way they lost these games early on in the season. I want to say the Jets finished with 6 or 7 one-loss one-score defeats. And Rodgers had the ball in his hands 5, 6 of those 7 to put the Jets on top. You go back to the Broncos game and Greg missing that kick, and how emblematic that would be for the remainder of the season. I don't think any Jets fan really hit the panic button after that game. It was a 10-9 defeat. The offense didn't look good. Rodgers looked old. The weather was bad. There were so many things that you could hang your hat on. And then that just developed into a one-possession Vikings loss, a one-possession Bills loss. And I speak for myself when I say this. I have never been more emotionally checked out from a Jets season, from expectations, from a hopeful standpoint, than after that abysmal, miserable loss to the Arizona Cardinals off of a bye.
Right.
Off of a bye.
That's what the Jets do.
How many times have we seen that?
It's exactly what they do. Out of their last 26 games off of 10 days of rest or more, they're 4-22. That is the sign of a bad organization. That is the sign of a bad franchise that has no leadership, that has no guidance, that has no I don't know what it is. The players and the media, Aaron Rodgers is going on the fucking Pat McAfee show on Tuesdays talking about how the Jets are cursed. That's your starting quarterback you're spending $40 million on. I don't care if he took a pay cut. He's still getting paid $40 million. It's ridiculous how this season went, and it's it embodies what the New York Jets have been since about 2011. And there's really the hoopla around Saleh changing the culture, the hoopla around Douglas and how good of a GM he was. At one point, we wanted to build statues out front of MetLife for him. Now the guys going to Diana Rossetti, Zach Rosenblatt, you name the guys, they're pushing these narratives, pushing these stories that are just further burying the Jets in terms of just being humiliated and being an organization that people don't want to be a part of. People, are ridiculed for being a fan. I wear this hat 3-4 days a week, and I wear it with pride because I'm a Jets fan. There's nothing I'm going to do. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to. They could go 0-17. Unfortunately, I'm still going to be a Jets fan. That being said, this year was the first year I was truly, truly, truly embarrassed at times to be wearing Jets gear, to be the guy where people are asking me what's going wrong, and I'm trying to make up excuses. I'm trying to pull things out that, if we do this, it'll fix this. Devontae Adams getting traded for at the deadline. Robert Saleh getting fired. The change of OC going from Hackett having nothing to do with the organization. How embarrassing is that as well? Hey, you're going to have nothing to do with the game plan on Sundays or Mondays, yet you're not going to lose your job. It's just a total embodiment of embarrassment, and it's just the theme of this season. It's frustrating, and this is probably the most frustrating I've felt about the Jets in about 6-7 weeks, just because I've kind of, don't see, don't do, don't hear, don't say kind of thing. But here we are in this platform to kind of discuss it. It shouldn't have gone this way. I want to say about 75 to 80% of other organizations in the Jets' place this season with the talent and the expectations around them would have performed differently, some of them majorly differently. But here we are.
I mean that the most bizarre thing is exactly, I think, what you just said. If you look at the first probably like 6 weeks of the season, Denver Broncos should have been a win. Vikings should have been a win.
Yep.
Bills Monday Night Football should have been a win. Those 3 games alone changed the entire trajectory of the season. I mean, those are all playoff teams. Some of those are Super Bowl contenders, serious Super Bowl contenders. And very easily you look at 1 or 2 things that change and we win those games. And in my opinion, the entire trajectory of the season changes with that. But I also think it shows, to your point, how poor of leadership they had from top to bottom. I mean, you lose a couple games and suddenly the season just goes on a downward spiral. I mean, you don't go from competing and basically winning the game against both against the Broncos, Vikings, and Bills in back-to-back weeks to suddenly you're getting blown out by however many points by the Cardinals in a couple of weeks later. So it really, I think just like previous seasons, it really just showed how the team fell apart. And that starts from the top. And I say poor Jeff Ulbrich, but at the same time, I don't feel bad for him at all.
Yeah.
The guy's getting paid millions, and he really he let the team again fall apart. This falls on him.
Yeah.
Saleh should have been fired in the offseason. I think that was the first mistake, and they gave him a little bit of leeway, and Ulbrich, didn't take advantage of the opportunity that he had to potentially become the long-term head coach or at least audition for other teams. I think now he'll be lucky to even be a coordinator next season with any other team. So just really, really bizarre.
Yeah. Just
I think you can pinpoint where the whole thing went wrong, but you got to go back 2 years. There's several things. The first thing was going into last season without a viable backup quarterback. You signed a quarterback who at that time was turning 40, coming off a thumb injury. Tyrod Taylor should have been on the team last year. If he had, maybe we would have made the playoffs. If not Tyrod Taylor, a whole list of Joe Flacco, the guy that I can't even, the guys that have been around, Brissett, all those guys that every year change teams. The guy from the Jaguars, I can't remember his name now, been all over. Those guys were all available last year. The first mistake was not signing a backup quarterback. That could have saved the whole season. The second mistake was letting Rodgers have an involvement in personnel decisions and bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, who's a terrible offensive coordinator. Bringing all his buddies from Green Bay, like Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, and the guy that played offensive line last year, I can't remember his name, and letting him have too much of a say in personnel decisions. Then in the offseason, basically destroying our defensive line and not replacing it with viable personnel, just misjudgment all around. Letting Bryce Huff walk, letting John Franklin Myers walk, or he got traded. Yeah. Not re-signing all those rotational interior defensive linemen who were cheap but played hard, replacing them with guys like Javon Kinlaw, who were already known commodities as a failure in San Francisco under good coaching. And not only do we sign a guy like that, we pay about $8 million for a one-year deal. We could have signed Quentin Jefferson and Solomon Thomas and one more guy for that amount of money. Instead, we spent $8 million on a guy who was clearly already known as a dog, and not in a good way. And we brought him in and expected him to be different. So that was the next mistake, destroying our defensive line. You know, we never would play Bryce Huff more than passing downs. We never gave him a chance to be an all-around defensive end, but yet this year, McDonald, who had a great year, he got a lot more reps than Huff ever did, and Huff's probably more of a two-way defensive end than McDonald is. If we had given Huff that same amount of leeway or plays, maybe that would have been one step closer to maybe keeping him. So I think you can map this whole thing out right to the very end, you know, and it kind of leads into my last point, that one thing that I'm hearing a lot that I don't buy, and I've mentioned this before, we should have never fired Robert Saleh after 5 weeks. Look what happened. Yeah, he wasn't great, but now we know. No, we don't know shit. That don't mean nothing to me. These are professional players. This defensive system had been in place for 3.5 years, with most of the guys on this team on the defense at least in their third year or beyond. Even if Saleh was the main cog of the defense, why couldn't we stay status quo? Saleh's gone. We're not going to make much changes. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We got the same personnel, the same system, the same assistant coaches. Why did the defense go from being top 5 to being one of the worst in the league? I'm not buying that when Saleh left, that basically was the end of our team and the end of our defense. That should have never been the case. The players quit, and the coaches basically were never any good, you know, to begin with in terms of maintaining respect. All the players had to do was continue to be coached and keep a positive attitude and play and just do what they've been doing already, and we would have been better off. But our coaching staff wasn't good enough to maintain their respect, to discipline them, to keep them in check, to bench guys like Michael Clemens, Javon Kinlaw, Hassan Reddick, who just was playing out the string without getting hurt. Those guys laid down, quit for whatever reason, and we didn't have the coaching staff that had the balls to let them maintain the same system that was already in place. So I don't buy this shit that if Saleh had stayed, we would have won more games. We should have won the same amount of games with him or without him. It's just the players basically didn't want to play anymore.
It's in hindsight, a lot of it is almost insulting to the average fan's level of intelligence. I mean, if you truly look at just like how many no-brainer moves they did or did not make that they then tried to spin a different angle. I mean, you can look back to Malachi Corley. You're telling me that you had Malachi Corley ranked higher than Brian Thomas Jr. on the Jaguars, who had one of the best rookie seasons ever. I mean, little things like that. It's like, not only did they make the wrong moves time and time again, but then it's like the way they go about pushing their agenda and the narrative to almost insult our intelligence. At times, it truly feels like your average Joe who just watches football could do a better job of building a roster or maintaining a roster than what they've done over the last couple of years. So, yeah, I totally agree. Robert Saleh should never been head coach of the Jets going into the 2024 season. I think it was the right move made at the wrong time, and it was too late. Had they maybe fired him this time last year, we could have had maybe a Mike Vrabel as coach right now. And I guarantee you give Mike Vrabel this roster that we had this past season, we're probably sitting here talking about our playoff hopes. At the very least, there's not all these crazy storylines and drama that came about the season, and in general, there's just a much better outlook. So yeah, it's again, it's almost insulting.
Yeah.
Let me
No.
interject real quick about Corley, and then I'll let you go, Matt. I think the decision on Corley was made by Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers didn't like Corley right from the get-go. Maybe Corley came in cocky. Maybe Aaron Rodgers felt like he didn't show him enough respect, because I've heard stories about Corley. I think long before Corley dropped that ball, before he got into the end zone, being that this coaching staff has never really done anything, it's always been Rodgers. I think that down the line, we're going to find out it wasn't the coaching staff. It was Aaron Rodgers who didn't want Corley on the field. That's just I haven't read anything or heard anything. That's just my gut feeling that decision on Corley's future this year was all made by Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
No,
Got to be something. There's something there beyond. He's not much. What's the answer they keep saying? He's not mature enough from a football standpoint. Give me a break. I mean, the guy is physically talented. You give him a few reverses per game. You're telling me he can't at least get on the field for that, or punt returns. Instead, we have to watch Xavier Gibson, who's done absolutely nothing since that punt return for a touchdown last year. I mean, again, just an insult.
Rodgers went to Salah, and Rodgers went to whoever, Nathaniel Hackett or whatever. I said, "Don't put that guy on the field. Right. I don't want him out there. If he's out there, I'm going to send him off." Something like that. That's what I think happened.
Yeah. Well, just so many different things, and this is as much blame as Salah deserves in terms of where the Jets are, because make no mistake, the average fan that doesn't watch, SNY, that doesn't keep up with the Jets daily, that doesn't watch them play on Sundays, just watches ESPN and NFL Network, they're going to be the people that are going to say, oh, they should have never fired Salah. But let's be honest, in terms of you take all 32 teams and all the interim coaches, you could argue that the Jets fielded 2 of the 3 worst coaches in all of football this year. Outside of Dennis Allen, I'd say Salah and Ulbrich were. You mean to say these teams were so undisciplined? Of course, you got young rookies making rookie and boneheaded mistakes because there was no accountability for the veterans. You think that they were holding these young guys accountable? Malachi Corley, you talk about putting the Alan Lazard and Xavier Gibson on the field over Malachi Corley. I'm sorry, there was not a large sample size for me to sit here and say Corley is better than those 2 guys. But let's be honest, we saw the guy get a handful of touches, and a couple times he flashed, a couple times he looked good. And Xavier Gibson, you can't say that for outside of one play that was, 16, 17 months ago. And that reflects to the job that Joe Douglas did as well in terms of how thin that wide receiver room was outside of Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. You had to go and trade a pick that now we're missing out on. It didn't mean anything for this year, and I believe we're missing a 3rd round this year, and what is it, a 4th next year or something, a 5th the next year?
I think we have all our picks. I think we accrued some to make up for the one. I think right now we do have at least 1 pick in every round.
We got a 3rd back from the Lions, which will be a late pick in the 3rd round, but instead of having the 3rd or 4th pick overall in the 3rd round that we're now sending to Las Vegas. But you look at the wide receiver room, you look at what you mentioned earlier, Dad, not signing a backup quarterback last year. Have we had competent safety play in the last 3 years, 4 years?
Jamal Adams the last time.
But again, Robert Saleh knows best, and his defense doesn't require good safety play.
Tony Adams, undrafted free agent, was supposed to be the next coming of Bob Sanders, was supposed to be the next coming, the back-end guy. He stinks.
Right.
He stinks, and Woody Johnson gets all
Brownlee
this
was
hate.
supposed to be a great receiver.
Yeah. Woody Johnson not standing up for the guy, but these leaks that it's very obvious it's Douglas about not wanting to trade for Jerry Jeudy. Guess what? Jerry Jeudy stinks. He wanted to make a difference on the Jets.
The best way to think about it is if you're employed with any employer for 3-4 years and you're failing at your job every single year, at what point, any other job, any other industry, yes, you're either going to get fired or you're going to start, your manager leadership is going to start overtaking your responsibilities and taking things away from you because you're not getting the job done here. All this stuff about Woody Johnson basically taking the reins this past year, why wouldn't he? First of all, he's the owner. He's a billionaire. He gave these guys the longest leash you could possibly have at the highest level of professional sports, and now the guy's being badmouthed because he did that. I mean, why wouldn't you? He's invested millions and billions of dollars of this team and getting zero results from the poor hires that he originally made. So that the leaks and all the stories that are coming out, I think you could do an entire episode, an entire podcast of that alone. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. But again, if you just apply some logic and look at it from a basic, look at it from any other industry, look at it from any other job perspective, I think Woody had every right to fire these guys and veto a trade or make a trade for Davante Adams in hopes of a last minute turnaround. So yeah,
Woody had every right to do it. The only mistake he made was the timing of Robert Saleh, the timing of Joe Douglas. You could argue that Douglas could have been. I don't think Douglas was necessarily on the hot seat in terms of getting fired this last offseason, but you could have definitely made the argument. You look at, just to piggyback off of your statement about leashes, look at the Houston Texans. They've made the postseason 2 years in a row after having the second worst record in the NFL. Last year, they were the biggest turnaround in all of football. Look at the Denver Broncos this year. Look at the Washington Commanders this year. Guys, it doesn't take that long to build to get a 7th seed. That's all we're asking for.
Yeah.
We're not asking to win after 5-6 years of Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, you would have been hoping that you're vying for a Super Bowl. All we want is a 6th or a 7th seed, just a little bit of hope, and we couldn't get that. Meanwhile, the Washington Commanders, the Denver Broncos, the Houston Texans, these are all teams that were shitty and just as bad as the Jets in terms of organizational structure and in terms of talent on the field, and they're in the playoffs. And guess what the Jets are doing? Half the team is either on Twitter bitching and complaining and moaning about the fans and the media, or they're in Cancun or somewhere, Mexico, on vacation already, and care less about the team.
Can't even get a single, lightning in a bottle. Look at the Jaguars. I mean, even the Jaguars every 3-4 years have one random season where they make the playoffs. We can't even get one of those.
The Jaguars have been to an AFC championship before the Jets have been to a playoff game.
Right.
The Jacksonville Jaguars.
Every team in North American sports, basketball, hockey, football, baseball, I believe, has made a playoff appearance since the last time the Jets were in. I'm pretty sure that goes in all sports.
I believe, are the only team that has.
And in football now, they've all made it. Now that the Broncos they broke their drought as well. And the Commanders had a drought. So we're the last standing. But, it kind of takes us to the next point. We've talking a lot about Aaron Rodgers. And I guess the question we can open up now, does he stay or does he go? And I have to admit, I had been going back and forth on this for the last several weeks. And even though he had a great game, the last game of the year, after waiting for the season to end and rethinking everything about, all the favoritism and the decisions he makes and how he runs everything. And I'm ready to say goodbye to Aaron Rodgers, regardless of how, even if he takes a pay cut. I'm ready to move on right now. And I watched all these final games. And I mean, I'm just watching from a TV, but from my standpoint, it looks like this guy was playing his favorites right down the stretch. He was staring down receivers like you never saw a Hall of Fame quarterback stare down receivers. He stared down Allen Lazard and Davante Adams, and he made Garrett Wilson at best the third option, possibly 4. I got a feeling he kind of liked Conklin better too. And I don't know the full dynamics of what happened there, but definitely Garrett Wilson also. And that's why I'm so sure Corley was blackballed because of him. He did the same. He did the best receiver, maybe the best overall young talent on the team. And for whatever reason, he didn't like him and he put him in timeout. And from the day Davante Adams got here, Garrett Wilson became the third or fourth option. He would force balls to Davante Adams. And I know all these people are saying, well, look at the numbers, 101 receptions, 1,100 yards. But if you watch the game, you look at the points in the game he threw to him. In garbage time and late in the game, the non importance of the plays, little 3-yard curl out, little 5-yard curl in. It was almost like Rogers knew exactly what he was doing to window dress this. He gave him he gave a bone every once in a while. That's how it seemed like to me. Rogers is good enough to do those type of things. And at the end of the day, it seemed like to me completely he phased out our best guy and he was staring down his buddies. And I wish there was a stat for how many times a quarterback audibles out of a play. I know our coaching is bad. And I heard that when he was in Green Bay, him and LaFleur got at it a lot, mainly because Rodgers was audibling out of LaFleur's plays because he just didn't want to run anything but his own offense. We'll never know the full amount, but I bet if the Jets could go back and look at a play that was called and what he actually ran, I wouldn't be surprised if more than 50% of the plays were audibled out of by Rodgers into something else. We ran the ball less than anybody this year. I think I read a stat that Breece Hall never had more than 12 touches in a game. And I believe that's all Rodgers, not all, but mostly Rodgers audibling out of what he wanted, his archaic offense to his buddies. He played his power. The coaches did nothing about it. And for those reasons, I want Rodgers gone. Give me a bridge quarterback for a year or two. Maybe we can pull a New York Mets this year, Make some simple changes, go with the talent we already have, bring in a good coach like Mendoza, and maybe we can win 9 games and sneak in. But I'm in the camp right now. I don't give he takes a 50% pay cut. I want him out. I want all his money paid off next year. I want to start fresh right now. I think that's the best thing going forward to change the culture of this organization.
Yeah, I think I'll admit, from about the halfway point in the season where it was clear as day we were going nowhere and a lot of this drama was truly starting to come to light, I seem to flip-flop on my stance with Rodgers literally every week. There's some weeks where I'm like, absolutely need to bring him back. And I think it boils down to this. Purely from a talent perspective, would I bring him back? Absolutely. I firmly believe you're not going to get a better talent even at his age and his availability from a health perspective. I don't think you're going to find better than Rodgers next year. But if that also means pissing off your young star like Garrett Wilson and alienating him and eventually losing him for a trade request, then absolutely not. And I'm afraid that's where we're at this point in time. I agree. I think there's something there. I think they both have a certain level of respect for one another, for the team, that they're not going to air it publicly, at least during the season. And they did a good job of that this year. But it did feel like something was there. In fact, I've probably watched the replay at least 4 or 5 times now when I forget who scored, when Breece Hall scored his touchdown this past week against the Dolphins. If you go back and watch, every player runs up to Breece Hall. They celebrate, they give him a pat on the back. Rodgers runs up. Garrett Wilson and Rodgers walk right by each other as if they don't even know each other. You look at every other player and their interaction with Rodgers, they're high-fiving, they're handshaking and everything. That's not coincidence, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if you go back and look at the other touchdowns, maybe they dap each other up, but something is there. And at the very least, there's so much meat left on the bone with Garrett Wilson. He's great. He's one of the elite talents, young talents in the league. And yet despite that, there's so much more there, so much more untapped potential. And if I'm him, drama aside, I'm thinking, okay, I've got to go somewhere to showcase my ability and get paid. I'm being underutilized. And so I hope that with this next regime, no matter who's quarterback, I really hope he becomes the focal point of the offense. I know kind of going off script here and taking this a different direction. I actually going to throw out a little bit of a hot take. I'm kind of starting to get to the point where I'm starting to get a little bit fed up with Breece Hall as well. I agree. He's another one who's very underutilized. It's complete asinine that he averaged only 12 touches per game when you look at how well he catches the ball and whatnot. But look how many drops and look how many fumbles he also had this year. And I can't help but wonder, if that's a product of his practice habits or whatever it is. I don't know. Something seems to be kind of missing there, and he's also becoming more vocal on social media, and just I don't know, his presence with the media doesn't exactly scream like I want to be here long term and I'm one of the guys that's getting the rest of the team fired up. A lot of times it's kind of like, woe is me, head down. Just I don't know, something's been kind of rubbing me the wrong way with him. And I will say I was actually pleasantly surprised with Isaiah Davis. I don't know if he's the running back you truly build around for the future, but maybe him and Braylon Allen are someone that you could pair up with a third running back and get by for a season or two if it means getting draft picks for Breece Hall. Not suggesting they should do that, but I also don't think it's a crazy idea to maybe start considering as we start to turn the page. So I'll focus on Rodgers, and I know we need to get into GMs and coaches and whatnot, but that's my answer on him specifically.
Well, real quick, I want to touch on the Breece Hall thing. Look at all the top seeds in the playoff. Look at Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo. Even looking at outside of the Eagles, looking at Detroit, looking at Buccaneers. Running back by committee. They don't have a guy. The continuation of malpractice would be paying Breece Hall an extraordinary amount of money to be on the Jets with as many holes as they have to fill. He had a great 6 games of his rookie year. He came back last year, didn't look nearly as explosive, and then this year didn't look even nearly as explosive as he was the year before that. With the drops and the fumbles, they were timely. I am suggesting that I'm not saying you trade him, but you let Breece Hall play out of his rookie contract. Hey, you're running back. If you're going to go out and get paid like a luxury, it's got to be by a team like Kansas City, Philadelphia, the teams that you see doing that, Baltimore. But even these teams with great running backs like the Lions and the Ravens, they're still running back by committee. And Breece Hall kind of strikes me as this guy where he wants to be that, that every down cowbell back. And considering the mileage he put on himself in college, I just don't see it working out long term with him. And you cut that kind of goes to my focus of Garrett Wilson. And more importantly, Aaron Rodgers, the answer is no. And it's simply put, no. And is not because of the talent, is because of everything that comes with it. If you have Aaron Rodgers, you're likely bringing back Davante Adams. Garrett Wilson ain't putting up with another year of this shit. A lot of these guys ain't putting up with another year of it. A lot of fans, a lot of media. I mean, what we saw was buddy ball. We just saw down south, South Georgia, good old boy system buddy ball on the New York Jets at the highest national level. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? And guess what? It got us 5 fucking wins. The answer, simply put, is no. I've been kind of back and forth on this, but now that the season's over, I watched Sunday's game. That trick play to Davante Adams back to Rodgers was the epitome of the last 3 months. What was it? It was so hilariously, exhaustingly miserable to watch. Just that one play, but it embodied what this season has been like. Aaron Rodgers is a decision maker. He is a play caller. He is a GM to a certain degree. He is all these things when all the New York Jets needed him to do was come in and play quarterback. And he did that decently, but he did everything else so poorly. Going on Pat McAfee every Tuesday when the team's reeling, losing every game by 1 score or getting blown out every game. And the guy still thinks it's a good idea to go on Pat McAfee with his buddy every Tuesday. And then we trade for Davante Adams. Garrett Wilson gets phased out. Everyone else's numbers goes down except Davante Adams has this great resurrecting season. Do you think that's by surprise? Do you think that's by coincidence? No. So the simple answer is he should not be back. He cannot be back. The Jets need a bridge quarterback. From a talent level, Aaron Rodgers would probably be the best bridge quarterback in the history of all of football. And he would probably, from a talent perspective, be the best fit for the New York Jets to compete next season. But that is not what you get when you have Aaron Rodgers. You get all of these other things, these other layers, whether it's how he deals with the media, whether it's how he, carries himself to the team. And he says that these have been the best 2 years of his career. Well, Aaron, I'm glad. I'm glad you found some personal conviction and are happy with the results. These 2 years have fucking sucked. They've won 12 fucking games. We haven't sniffed a fucking playoff spot, and I'm tired of it. I'm sick and tired of it. And having these guys jubilation on the sideline because Aaron Rodgers threw his 500th career touchdown pass, guess what? 460 of those things meant fucking nothing to me when he was in Green Bay. So I'm sick of it. I am pissed off and frustrated at the result of Aaron Rodgers coming to the New York Jets. And if he remains a Jet, nothing is going to change. He's going to continue to put up numbers with his buddies. That South Georgia good old boy buddy ball, we're going to be seeing it again. So the simple answer to simply put is he cannot be a Jet moving on. He should not be a Jet. And if he is, we're the old saying, we're delaying the inevitable. That's
well,
all.
Never mind the most obvious answer is the cap hit. I mean,
Yeah.
2025, you're going to take the cap hit regardless, but they can get ahead of 2026, which you hope they're back to true contention. And with this roster, there's really no reason why within a 2-year span of a new coach and regime, they shouldn't be back in the playoffs, or shouldn't be in the playoffs. What am I saying? Back. We haven't sniffed them in a decade plus. But I think at the most logical and easy explanation, I think, is you have to get ahead of the 2026 cap charge.
It's 49 million if you cut them. It's 63 million if you keep them for another year. That's 14. You can divide it over 2 years. I say get it all done with next year. It doesn't have to be. It could, like I said, I keep comparing it to the Mets. We have enough talent if we bring in the right coaching and fill it in modest positions. I think we can still be a playoff team next year.
Cap's going up from 230 to 290 as well. So, more dead money,
helps.
more money to spend.
Yeah.
Right. That helps. But, and summing the whole thing up, I think Aaron Rodgers is a bad influence on this team. He's become a leader, but not in a good way. And like I said, just watching him play these last several games, it seemed to me like he was just doing things till he was, I don't know what the word is. He was being antagonistic or defiant. You could see he was punishing some by doing for others. How many weeks did we have to watch him force feed Adams to try to get that 500th touchdown pass to him rather than somebody else? And the last point that you made as far as the jubilation with Rodgers, I feel that this was also one of the most unlikable group of players I've ever seen. And they're extremely tone deaf, and they have no respect, or really, I got the feeling they had no regard for the fans. I never heard a player come out and say, thank you, fans, for sticking with us. You guys are still coming out and cheering. We played for you guys. I know it didn't go the way the fans wanted, but we're going to be back. I never heard that shit. I heard the thing you're talking about with Breece Hall. One fan got on X and said, that figures the Jets would win the last game. And that's something a lot of us would say out of frustration. And Breece Hall got on and said, oh, yeah, and if we had lost, you would have said something bad about us, so shut the fuck up. You know what? That fan, I don't know who that fan is, but that fan could be someone like us who's been rooting for the Jets for 50-something years, who's frustrated, who spends a lot of money on time on the team, who's born and raised and lived a good portion of their life in New York. And this guy gets on there because he doesn't like the tweet and tells him to shut the fuck up. That rubbed me the wrong way. But yet I see other people going like, you go, Breece, you tell him. That's tone deaf, man. You got to understand where the frustration's coming from. And if we're booing, you got to take it. And if there's criticism, you got to take it. You don't have to agree, but you don't got to attack the fans there. And to me, right there, that just showed you the tone-deaf nature of the players. There's no connection between these players and what the fans feel. And so seeing all that jubilation on the sideline because Aaron Rodgers did whatever after this season, to me, if I was a fan, that would have pissed me off. I would have been booing just on that. I'm not saying you got to be – you can recognize it to a degree, but I felt like it was just way over the top. It almost made like everything was good. Quincy Williams was interviewed by Janae Copley after the game. He goes, "This is the best locker room I've ever been in. The camaraderie here is unbelievable. I made so much connection this year. This is the best team I've ever been on." And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Read the room. Read the freaking room. All that did to me is a disrespect towards the fans, and it's a total disconnect right now between the fans.
Yeah. No, he put a
We've got a
tweet
couple
out.
guests. We've got Madden and Molly checking in. We've got
Yeah.
Where's the camera?
A break from the frustration.
Yeah.
One of Brees Hall's tweets said, "I got time today."
yeah.
His tweet was, "I got time today. I wish you would have had more time working on the jug machine, not fumbling the ball in critical moments." And you said it right. We've been Jets fans for years, and these guys come in the organization, and I'm sure it means a lot to them. But it from a team standpoint, there was no camaraderie. There was nothing this year that gave you anything to root for or likableness from any of these guys.
Molly's been stewing on this and has a lot to say here, so I'm sure.
No, Brees Hall played for what, Iowa? Nothing. He's probably, he's got no. And I'm not saying you have to live in New York, but to me, if one of us could have made that comment on X, and it would have been justified. And he tells the guy, "Hey, you know what? If it's not for the fans, you're not making that kind of money." And we've seen that from Sauce Gardner getting into it with fans. I love DJ Reed, but he's come out and said disrespectful shit like, "I'm out of here." There was no point where I felt like the team had any consideration for what the fan base has been going through. And yes, we understand your frustration and we're with you and we're going to turn this thing around. I got that from the Mets. I don't get that from the Jets. I get the fact that they're defiant and they don't like this fan base because we come out and boo them. What the fuck did they expect?
Yeah. What has there been to cheer about other than the last time there was any hope and optimism or true was the game we were at on 9/11. Even this year, we kind of knew what was coming. The writing was on the wall. It was very obvious. You're running back the same coaching, the same management, the same. We added a 39-year-old left tackle. How I didn't see that was going to be a disaster, I don't know, but it was. But just we're at the 48-minute mark. I know real quick we got about 10 minutes. I say let's go through. If there is a way to fix it from a coaching standpoint, let's run through it. And then obviously as the offseason prolongs, we'll touch on it more since this has kind of been a venting episode, more of a how do we fix this episode, which I don't have the answers. I don't know how you do. Let's hear it.
You want to go first, Andrew, and then I'll go?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll start. I mean, first of all, I thought it was interesting. I've been scrolling Twitter as we've been talking, and get this: the Patriots have. I'm going to say something probably may or may not be politically incorrect, and I hope I don't offend anyone. But the Patriots have, in a matter of 2 days, already satisfied the Rooney Rule and interviewed two coaches who have been out of football since 2022 in Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich for their head coach position. They're also now scheduled to interview Mike Vrabel. So I think the writing's on the wall that the coach we had all hoped we had a very fair shot at in Mike Vrabel is probably going to be off the market within the next week or so. If I had to rank Vrabel is by far and away my top choice. And the reason being is I think he brings a level of credibility to the organization that we're severely lacking. You don't look at Vrabel and hypothetically, let's say the Jets have a losing season next year. You're not going to get all the extracurriculars that come with it. You're not going to get all this drama at the very least. It's hopefully, moving towards building a culture and the right team for the future. And you can't turn around and look and say, oh, well, they hired the wrong guy. I mean, the writing was on the wall. And it's like, well, hey, this guy comes from success. He's won 3 Super Bowls. He was successful as a coach. What else could the Jets or should the Jets have done? If nothing else, I think it's the safest pick that I think would also have the highest floor. And so assuming he's gone, looking at the list that of names that they've formally submitted requests for, I'm fairly certain they have formally requested an interview with Flores of the Vikings,
They've
as well as
requested
Josh
one.
McCown. I think that's the pairing right there. I would personally love to see Flores come in as head coach, with Josh McCown be offensive coordinator. Maybe they bring in a senior guy like Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator. I think if you look at Flores, what I like about him is he's kind of this no bullshit guy. Once again, brings a level of credibility. He took the Dolphins to the playoffs his very first year. And even when he got fired, he had a winning record with the team. And ultimately, the reason he got fired was because he didn't feel like you build a team around Tua Tagovailoa with his injury history and him being a mediocre check down passer. Fast forward, 3-4 years, and he was absolutely right. The injury, his skill, don't get me wrong, very talented quarterback, but is he the guy that you're going to build around, give a max contract for? It looks like no. And so that would be at this point my top choice. I do like that they are casting a very wide net. I like that they're being very decisive. They clearly had a plan going into this week. I mean, we saw a flurry of names, like a dozen names between GMs and head coaches yesterday. You don't just come up with that. I mean, you would hope firing your head coach in October. They've obviously been doing their research. They've obviously had a list of names that they were going to request interviews for. So it's not like they're doing anything earth-shattering. It's just nice to see that they did actually have a plan and that they seem fairly prepared. The only other thing I'll touch on before pass it over to y'all for y'all's thoughts is bringing in the 33rd firm, I think is what it's called. Of course, as usual, the Jets do something that I actually thought is pretty wise and can't hurt, and yet they get chastised, they get criticized, by the national media. Yes, one of the guys leading the search is a former GM. Guess what? That GM was the last guy that actually had any success with the organization. It also doesn't mean that he's the one selecting the coach and the head and the GM himself. He knows Woody Johnson. He knows the dynamics of a New York market. He knows the dynamics of working within that organization. I actually think it's a very smart decision to hire someone to help lead the search. You've also got Spielman. And so I like it. I think that bringing in resources that to have a say and to help kind of guide and lead is a great thing. The question becomes, how much is Woody and Chris Johnson actually going to lean on them and follow their advice? Those guys can point them one direction, doesn't mean that Woody's going to follow it. I said I was going to touch on one thing. I've got one more. The GMs that have been named, they've got, Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs, and I think Mike Greenberg of the Bucks, in addition to several other names. I'd say those two, just from the list of names that I've seen, in addition actually to the VP of player personnel at the Vikings. Those are the three top choices that I would have today. Just looking at their background, coming from successful organizations. I think the guy, Mark Borgonzi in particular, he's been instrumental reading up on him in a lot of their drafts. And I think that's where, take away Joe Douglas's one solid year of drafting where, quite frankly, anybody could have made those draft picks in those scenarios. They were as easy as they come. I think that's the most important thing there is, we're now going to have to be very sensitive to the cap these next 2-3+ years. Hopefully you've seen how quickly the Chiefs rookies have been able to contribute in that organization. You'd hope that maybe a guy like that can come in, identify talent early on and help turn the ship around. So very exciting. I think we'll know it by the end of January. I was looking, and I think it was Saleh was announced as the head coach January 14th of 2021. Which is crazy to think that's a week away from now. I don't think we're going to see anything that soon, but it's exciting times. This is where we, as Jets, seem to flourish and win is in the off season. It doesn't actually matter.
I'll make mine quick. Vrabel would have been mine as well. One thing, don't sleep on, if for some reason Vrabel and the Patriots fall through, let's say, as there's rumor that the Patriots are a little cheap with their money and their salaries. If that falls through, I think the Jets are an automatic lock because wouldn't he love to then stick? He didn't hire me last year. You didn't give me what I wanted this time around. I'm going to your division rival and signing with the Jets. So most likely he's going to New England, but if that falls through, if he doesn't get what he wants, I think the Jets can just slide him right in.
Right.
If I'm the Jets, though, I'm not waiting on him too long either. Flores right now kind of becomes my number one favorite too. And if we lock things up pretty quickly and we decide that we're a match, I'm not waiting on Vrabel's final decision. Now, if it happens to work out where he's still available, fine. But as of right now, Flores becomes my first choice. A name we're not mentioned. I'm all right with Pete Carroll. And this is something I had to think about a little bit as far as his background, his personality. Hasn't been out of football that long. He's two. The only guy I'm going to go with, he's coached before, but I still look at him as a newbie. I don't know what a newbie is. Kingsbury. I give him one more shot. I know that it didn't work the first time in Arizona, but he had Kyler Murray might have had a lot to do with that and the dynamic there. So he's the one guy I would go with. That's not that seasoned kind of guy. And if all else fails, that's the only time I'm going to use my heart instead of my head and think about bringing in Rex. And the last thing I'll say is, if you think it's embarrassing right now and there's a shitstorm on the Jets, if we hire Rex Ryan, until we prove that we can win with him, embarrassment level and the shit we're going to hear is nothing compared to what it's going to be right now if they bring Rex back. So hide your jerseys, hide your shirts. You ain't going to want to wear them until September when we win some games if they hire Rex Ryan.
I'm ready. I just got, as we're recording, just got the notification. New York Jets have completed their interview with Rex Ryan. And to be completely honest with you guys, before you said what you had to say, Dad, before the notification, this has to do with I have little to no confidence in the New York Jets making the right decision here. Whether it's Flores, whether it's Vrabel, I would hope it's those two. I don't see it happening. Pete Carroll sounds good. Whatever it is, I don't have any confidence that the general manager that Woody Johnson's going to hand select's going to be any good. And I don't believe that the head coach is going to be any good. What I'm getting at is I expect us to be hurt more, and I'm ready to be hurt more. That being said, if I'm Woody Johnson right now, today, I'm not letting Rex Ryan out of the building.
I heard the Jets were willing to let Rex out of the building, but Rex won't let himself out of the building.
Here's my
at the very least, and you can't say this for any guy that has coached or he wants to be there. He wants to turn it around. And I genuinely believe Rex when he says he wants to be that head coach. He wants to have the Jets a winner just as much as us three do. And if you lock us three in a room with any of those coaching candidates, I am 99% positive we would all leave that room saying Rex has to be the guy. And
I totally agree with you. And I think if you're a fly on the wall and you could hear every interview candidate, I think you would walk away from Rex's interview just absolutely mind blown of just like, this is the fucking guy. Yeah. I have two major problems with Rex though. Yesterday on ESPN, he came out and said, and keep in mind, this is a guy that's been out of the NFL for 10 years. He's had ample time to prepare for this. He doesn't know who his coaching staff would be. And he's already said he would take a step back and be more CEO type. So who the hell is he bringing in? That's number one. Number two, what GM is going to want to work with a guy that has been out of football for 10 years and attach himself to Rex as the coach? So that's the biggest issue that I have there. And I think they're very, very, very glaring issues.
Mike Tannenbaum's going to rehire himself.
That's what
I would feel a lot better about Rex. What's that?
I said you thought they brought him in to find a GM. He is your GM.
Right.
I feel a lot better about Rex. If you told me that Cliff Kingsbury, am I getting the name right? He's going to be the OC and Josh McCown's going to be the quarterback coach and Rex is the head coach. I'm okay with that. If I know those guys are coming in. Rex is a guy that brought in Tony Sperano as the offensive coordinator. Okay. And let's not forget what happened to Mark Sanchez in the Snoopy Bowl because Rex played him in the third quarter of a meaningless game. So I love Rex, but thinking with my head, he's like my fifth choice.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
To be totally honest, I don't see a world where you could hire him as maybe in an advisory role, maybe as a coordinator. But we have to.
we
have
got 5 seconds. It's
Okay.
been
I'll
real.
leave
It's
it
been
at that.
fun. We got to wrap it up. We'll be back
See.
with some more content soon, guys.
We're out.